everybody. I just wanted to say a few words before the podcast started. We recorded this before we knew about Ron Miller's passing, and we do mention him and his kind of mixed legacy. We talk a little bit about it in the podcast, but I just wanted to send my thoughts and prayers with his family in his passing, and I am grateful for the risks that he took, and that he's particularly with live action films, and so I just didn't want that to come off as cold and rude. So anyway, I just wanted to do that. So enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody. We're so excited today for another episode of Talking Disney. This is our second episode of this year that we're doing each month. Stanford and I get together and we talk about a classic Disney film in the Disney canon. And it's really fun. And we go all over the place as far as it's just a random number that picks what we're going to talk about as opposed to going in chronological order. And this month we had the film Fox and the Hound selected for us to talk about. And I'm Rachel, and Stanford is here.
Hi, Rachel. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Excited to talk about this movie with you.
Yes. So this came out the year of my birth, 1981.
1981.
Yes.
Good year.
Yes. And this is it's one of those movies maybe kind of like Oliver and Company, which we've talked about in a previous podcast, that's more interesting, I think, to talk about from a behind-the-scenes standpoint for Disney than necessarily to talk about the actual movie. I will dive into both. It was a very tough time for Disney, and this movie really opened a lot of wounds for within the animation department. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you remember seeing it as a child?
I do. I remember seeing it as a child, and I didn't like it as a child, and I still don't like it very much.
Yeah.
And I think the comparison with Oliver and Company is apt.
Yeah. I remember thinking it was very sad as a kid, and I didn't really like sad movies as a kid. And so it's not one that we watched a lot. I will say outright, it is a masterpiece in comparison to the Fox and the Hound 2, which you should never watch.
Yeah. I refuse to watch it. After those Aladdin cheapquels, I won't watch them. I know they exist, but I won't watch them.
The Aladdin ones are pretty solid compared to
that's what I've heard. This Fox and Hound 2 just sounds horrible.
It's so bad. It's a midquel. And supposedly Todd and Copper run off to a carnival and meet a Reba McEntire and a bunch of singers band.
Yeah, aren't they gonna go join kind of join the circus or whatever? Or
it's like this band, this bluesgrass whatever band.
It's like, are you kidding me?
What?
Like, who came up with that idea?
I have no idea.
Horrible.
But yeah, so let's talk about some of the tumultuous history, even just with the director of this movie. So it started out the idea of Wolfgang Reitherman.
Right.
It was based on a novel.
Mm-hmm.
And he started out as a director, but along with Art Stevens. But he struggled to get along with Art Stevens.
Yeah.
And Ron Miller, who was the CEO, president of Walt Disney Animation, he was very involved in this as well, and there was a lot of discussion between Ron Miller and Wolfgang Reitherman. Of course, Wolfgang Reitherman is one of the 9 old men.
Exactly, and an incredible track record.
Yeah,
and a real pro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, his work went all the way back to Silly Symphonies. He was an incredible animator, and he, was a director in films like Winnie the Pooh,
The Many Adventures of Jungle Book,
the Jungle Book,
the
Aristocats, Robin Hood. So he was pretty amazing, and he wanted the story, I think, to go in different ways. And I don't know, there was just it's an interesting, because originally I guess there were going to be two. It was going to be the Fox and the Hounds.
The Hounds, yeah. And then they opted to go just with one hound and to focus, which I guess was a bit of a deviation from the book, and focus on the friendship between Todd and Copper, right? But that's what I read. If I'm
right. And then, do you know when Richard Rich was brought in on this?
No, that was what I wanted to ask you about that too. At what point was Richard Rich brought in? I mean, was he there from the beginning, or was he there as just kind of when Wooly Reitherman finally just kind of had to succumb to the younger, people at the studio?
Yeah, because he's a really interesting character, because he started like in the mailroom at Disney, and he just worked up and worked up and worked up, and I always just laughed because his parents had to be the least creative people in the world to name their son Richard Rich, but he would go on to direct The Swan Princess, and which was kind of particularly a Utah favorite, I feel like.
Yeah, I think he had a lot of popularity in Utah. Well, then isn't he the guy behind the whole? I mean, speaking of Utah, the Living Scriptures.
I believe so. Yeah,
I think his company was the one who.
Yeah, and they did
produce that animation or supervised it, or.
Yeah, and they did the Alpha and Omega movie, which I have never. And he was actually a co-director, I guess, on Mickey's Christmas Carol. At least it's showing.
Oh yeah, I think I saw. Yeah, on his.
So
yeah, like on his IMDb page.
And I think that's the last thing he ever did. Oh no, Black Cauldron.
He worked on the Black Cauldron, didn't he?
He was a co-director, yeah. So that was the end for him for Disney.
Yeah.
For Richard Rich. But so he got involved in this, and then Art Stevens and Ted Berman became another co-director.
Yeah. And so it's just those three, Art, Ted, and Richard, that have the credit.
Right.
Right. Of the director credit. Wooly Reitherman doesn't have a director credit on this.
Did not get a director credit. On this Ted Berman also was a co-director of the Black Cauldron.
Okay.
So it was an interesting time.
Yeah. Well, and interesting time in that too, that the 9 old men were retiring. I believe this was the last film that Frank and Ollie worked on.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because you had these two kind of things going on. You had Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston, Cliff Nordberg, all doing sections of this movie. And then you had new animators, including you had John Lasseter, John Musker, Ron Clements, Glenn Keane, Tim Burton, Brad Bird, Henry Selick, Chris Buck, and Mark Dindal. And I mean, could you have a list of a more influential group of animators than that? I mean, amazing.
It's amazing. It's almost, I mean, it kind of, sometimes I think about this film as almost like it's a training film.
Yeah.
These guys were learning from the pros who were retiring. And it was a real kind of an end of an era. It's too bad that it's not a better film.
Right.
I think that I was kind of as an adult, as I learned more about it, it always kind of made me sad, because they said I never really liked the movie to begin with, but that's beside the point. That here these incredible animators weren't able to go out in a blaze of glory. You know?
Right.
More like a whimper.
Yeah, and you can feel, I think the reason why it doesn't work is you have that difference of that battle. And I sometimes that battle produces interesting art, and sometimes it just is a mess, and you can tell it was a mess. And it kind of is this movie. It's just tonally kind of all over the place. It doesn't, has some sweet moments we'll talk about, but like for instance here, you have the debate over, we'll talk about it, the debate over what to do with Chief. Is he gonna die?
That's immediately what I was thinking, is this whole thing with Chief, which really, I mean, wow, that would really have changed. I know we'll talk about it. But
here, like, just to show the kind of back and forth and the fight over this movie that you have Ron Clements, that he protested the Chief has to die. The picture doesn't work if he just breaks his leg. Copper doesn't have motivation to hate the fox. Likewise, the young members of the story team pleaded with Stevens to have Chief killed. Stevens countered that, geez, we never killed a main character in a Disney film, and we're not starting now. So anyway, there's that. You can just,
that had to have been tough. Well, then one other thing too, while we're just talking about animators, but Don Bluth worked on the film early on,
uncredited,
and then uncredited, and then he and a bunch of animators left. It was a big exodus, and they left, unhappily, right? I mean, I don't know. Some of the specifics on why they left. I mean, it was probably any number of things.
Well, it's interesting. So Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, John Pomeroy, and 13 animators all left, and they
quit, right? They quit Disney.
They quit, and it must have been pretty early on in the process, because they were still able to get Secret of NIMH done by 1982.
Yeah,
only
that's what I'm thinking. It must have been like late 70s that they left, and then started working on Secret of NIMH. Yeah,
which I love. Secret of NIMH. It's one of my favorites.
Well, personally. I mean, talk about I mean, maybe that's why they left. They could tell they didn't like the story, or this movie wasn't going anywhere, or who knows what was going on with the management of the studio. I think you have some idea, but maybe they just they had it.
It says here, animator Don Bluth animated several scenes, including Widow Tweed milking her cow.
That's right.
And so there were a few things, and this says Bluth and the new animators felt that Reitherman was too stern and out of touch, they left. Bluth, along with Gary Goldman, John Pomeroy, entered Ron Miller's office and turned in their resignation. Following their resignations, 13 animators followed suit in their resignations. Though Bluth and his team had animated substantial scenes, they asked not to receive screen credit. So they were forced. They had 17% of the animators were gone at that point. So says Miller ordered all of the resigning animators off the studio lot by noon of that same day, and would later push the release of Fox and the Hound from Christmas 1980 to summer 1981, which is super rare for Disney to push back a release date. I mean, almost never do they do that. I mean, Good Dinosaur, they did. There's a couple, but they rarely do that. So thanks for Madison. Poor. I mean, I don't say poor Ron Miller, because I don't think he was a very good president. But man, what a mess!
What a mess! Yeah, I mean, this sounds like, clearly the animation department was there was an upheaval going on, and it shows in the movie, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think so. And I mean, I appreciate Ron Miller in the sense that he was willing to push the company in ways, particularly in live action, in ways that they haven't ever really done since. I kind of like the fact that there was an era where we had Watcher in the Woods and some of those sort of more different kind of projects from Disney. But he, as far as the animation, I mean, this period was just a mess, and they had all the talent, but he just wasn't a strong kind of voice of this is direction we're going. I mean, we all have mixed feelings about Jeffrey Katzenberg, but no one can argue that he didn't have a strong voice as far as what
I mean,
the animation was going to be.
what amazing films they cranked out, you know?
Yeah. And I think the only I think you got to compare sort of Ron Miller to Michael Eisner. They're both they both had some interesting ideas, were willing to take risks, but were just not I don't think very strong leaders as far as animation goes. They were probably better as far as the parks, but even then, anyway, so it's an interesting period of Disney, and I'm just grateful that they survived.
Me too. I'm glad that they survived. I mean, because the Black Cauldron, holy smokes.
Yeah,
who knows
when
we'll get there, that whatever.
Yeah, it barely. I mean, Jodie Benson said, so this is 1989 when Little Mermaid was released, but she said it when I went to her panel at Comic-Con that they were like boxing stuff up. This was the Hail Mary, this was the last hurrah, this, the Little Mermaid, and so I mean that's pretty crazy if you think about that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, because what's Disney without its animation division?
Can you even imagine?
You just can't. but yeah, so close, and I think again, this film was a nail in the coffin for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right, so that's sort of some of the background, and I think particularly, a lot of people really praise. We'll talk about the bear fight, but you can really see that's also, even though it is really cool looking, it's part of the problem because it does not fit in with the movie at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it feels like it's in a whole nother movie. But
yeah.
Anyway, so you don't care for the film. What overall sort of thoughts do you have about the film itself?
So I think for me that the film is just like you said, it's everything is sad for the most part. There's a couple little happy moments, but it's all, to me, it's all sad. And again, not that everything, it has to be happy, whatever, but I guess maybe more to the point, I feel like it's joyless. Like there is so little joy in it. And again, I know they were going for something a little different too. And so I and I can see that through, hopefully modeling more objective eyes as an adult, I mean, hopefully, but I just feel like the film is joyless. Now, watching it as an adult, I feel like there's probably more of a poignancy that I would not have gotten as a kid. And I'll look forward to exploring that as we keep talking about it. But it's not that I don't like the tone. I think it's overly dramatic and not great.
I guess, I mean, for me, I feel like it's harmless. It doesn't really it's not one that really gets under my skin like something like The Rescuers for me does personally. But this movie is so corny. It is the sappiest, most cheesy movie in the history of Disney. And I watch Hallmark movies, so I like my cheesiness, I guess, but I don't know, this one is a lot cheesy. And we'll talk about one scene in particular that I guess a lot of people really love that is just super corny to me, but it has a nice message. I don't think it's an awful movie. It's very forgettable to me, and it's just not one of my favorites.
Yeah. I only watch this because I have to.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I watched it in 2010 when I did my Disney Canon view, and then I haven't seen it since then, since.
Yes.
Till this rewatch.
It's not one that I'm eagerly rewatching. So it starts out with our little fox. And one thing that's always bothered me about this movie is I personally think that the fox should be named Copper.
I know. It's so
Copper.
confusing. I
It's
have
okay.
to. Yeah, it's always. I'm with you. It always confuses me. Like what? And then why does Todd only have one D? I mean, I know it's short for toddler, but like,
Oh,
why does he only has one D?
oh, I didn't even realize that. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1D.
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like copper is kind of a deep amber kind of color, and that's the color of the fox.
yep. Agreed.
So it should be. It's very it's very confusing for me. But anyway, so yes, it starts out. This fox is orphaned by the hunters.
Yeah, there's almost like kind of a Bambi-esque scene within the opening credits.
Yeah.
Where Todd's mom is running from the hunters and trying to save her child.
Yeah.
And she doesn't make it.
And so the Widow Tweed adopts the fox, and I would be way more scared of a fox than this.
Well, I wanted to ask you if you know anybody who has domesticated a fox. I mean, I'm sure there probably are some people, but what in the world? You're domesticating a fox, and then she's like milking the cow, and then the fox comes out and the chickens are freaked out. I was like, well, of course the chickens are freaked out. It's a fox.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know I am not an animal person, so I'm the last person to be like,
I'm not the person to ask.
But I would definitely be scared of a fox, and I would not be as nice as the Widow Tweed. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Widow Tweed was really cute. And again, it's kind of tender. I mean, I know she's lonely, and the fox, can take the baby bottle or whatever. And she saved him, basically,
Yes.
with the help of those annoying birds, which we'll get to. But
were you ever wanting your childhood to bring home animals or anything like that?
No. We had a dog when I was a kid, but I like animals, but I don't just love them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it was Jeanette Noland is the voice of the Widow.
Yes, so the voice of Widow Tweed.
Yes.
And she does a nice job. I think.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And all the voice work is fine.
Yeah, the voice work is fine.
And then you have Amos Slade, who's a crazy person. He
lives across the way from the Widow Tweed. He's a nut.
He's nuts. He's like shooting people from his car and like
hot-tempered and
holy cow.
Yeah,
he is nuts.
Yeah, he's nuts. But he's got the dog named Chief, who's a hunting dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chief, and then yes, he gets this new puppy that he names Todd. It's a
little hound dog.
Yeah, and he is so cute.
He's so cute. I know. That's probably the thing I like the most. I just thought, I mean, puppies are so adorable anyway, and who I mean, I think most all animation, whatever, regardless of the studio, makes cute puppies, but Disney really makes cute puppies.
Right. Yeah.
And this was no exception.
Yes.
That's what I like the most probably about is the little puppy Copper is so cute.
Yeah. They are both they are very, very cute. And you have this pretty early on, you have this sort of montage of you see Copper and Todd playing together.
They become friends.
And you see Big Mama saying, wow, look at this. They're
Big
friends.
Mama the Owl, voiced by Pearl Bailey, who's kind of in a way almost like the narrator, kind of. I mean, not really. She's not really narrating, but she kind of she's at every pivotal scene.
Yeah. She's fine. It's all kind of sappy, but it's fine. And there's this whole scene where promise will always be best. Todd says, Copper, you're my best friend, and we'll always be best friends forever. So it's
just roll your eyes.
I know, my heart is made of stone. I think because it's in a montage and it has the music behind it and it's so early on and they're so little, just all that stuff all combined together.
Yeah.
Just, man, it is very sappy.
Yeah.
It almost feels like, I don't know, like an episode of Full House or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Really good point.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, that's that Pearl Bailey, who's the voice of Big Mama the Bird or the Owl. She's singing that "When You're the Best of Friends" song.
Right.
And I think that's probably the only song that anybody would probably remember from this movie, because there's a few other songs that are completely forgettable. Yeah. I just watched it a few hours ago and I forgot them.
There's one that I really irritates me, but yeah, that's probably the best song in the she has all the songs.
She sings all the songs. It's interesting that I don't know if you noticed this in the credits, but Corey Feldman is the voice of young Copper. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And, which I don't know if this is necessarily his first film, but
and Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Kurt Russell is the voice of adult,
iconic voice
of adult
child actors.
Copper.
I mean,
and Mickey Rooney is the voice of adult Todd. I didn't recognize the child voice of baby or of little Todd.
It's pretty crazy because can you imagine if we had to wait 4 years in between a Disney animated film?
I know.
That's what happened here, but twice. They had The Rescuers was in 1977, and this was in 1981, and then they had to wait 4 years again until Black Children, 1985.
And then Eisner and Katzenberg stepped up the production and were wanting something to come out once a year.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. I mean, no wonder we loved The Little Mermaid so much. I mean, not only is it a great movie, but I mean, I had only seen a handful of Disney animated films in my whole life.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's, 2 a year some years. It's amazing. It's just crazy. But anyway, so it's pretty cheesy, but it's cute enough. I guess I'm fine, I guess. But
I hear you, because you kind of, it's like, oh yeah, can we be friends forever? And he's like, because what's going to happen. It's like, oh dear, this is bad. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the comic relief, which I don't think works at all?
Oh, I don't mind it as much as you. I wish we got more of it. It's kind of, you get a little bit of a beginning, and then goes a long period where you have these
two birds. It's a woodpecker and a finch.
Yeah, it's Boomer and
Dinky, and they're trying to catch Squeaks the caterpillar because they want to eat him.
Yeah,
and I mean they're cute. The character designs are cute or whatever, but it's like I just felt like it's one of those almost like a Chip and Dale cartoon or something that like never ends. That they just keep coming after this caterpillar.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't fit with the whole rest of the movie. I kind of like that style of humor. I think it's kind of fun.
I do too. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's particularly, it reminded me of, what would be successful in a short.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I wish there had been more of it. And I wish that I don't know. I guess I didn't dislike it. But yeah, I do agree that it does feel kind of, it doesn't really work, even though I didn't dislike it.
That makes sense, and I respect that. Thanks for letting me rant about it. And I don't mean to be overly critical and sound even more curmudgeonly than I already am about this movie. But then again, I'm looking again about this later. But at the end of the film, when Squeaks changes, I will also wonder if that's kind of symbolic too, of what's going on. But
yeah, I guess there's a little bit there, but it's just I could have used more comedy to sort of.
Well, that's true.
I could have used more slapstick, sort of more comedy to tone down this heavy syrupy story. But yeah, I mean, I guess I just love Paul Winchell so much.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, he's always fun because it's just it's Tigger and a bird, is what it is, and it's fun.
But yeah, so it's an interesting thing, but they're hardly in the movie at all, and I wish that we got more of it. But
See, and I thought they were in a lot. Maybe
oh, really?
I'm just it's our different views on it.
That's really funny. Yeah, so you have this whole thing with Amos getting mad at Todd. I still want to call him Copper till the day I die.
Yeah.
Gets mad at Todd and gets mad at the widow because he's bothering Chief, I guess. And
he's just a fox, and foxes need to be shot and skinned and hung up on his wall.
Yes.
Because he's got that whole wall of skinned critters, foxes and any number of things.
Yeah. Chief, and Slade gets really upset, and he's going to kill Todd, but the Widow Tweed stops, and he says he's going to kill him if he ever trespasses on his farm again. And this is when we get Slade going on a hunting trip with his dogs and taking Copper.
And he's going to teach little puppy Copper how to be a hunting dog.
Yes. And so that's when we get this whole scene with Big Mama telling Todd that he won't, that this will be the last time that they're able to be friends, that Copper is his enemy. And then you see they show Todd all of the pelts and the shack for all the hunting kills.
Yeah.
And it's pretty upsetting for a kid's movie.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'd be upsetting, and I can't remember what my reaction was, because again, I didn't like. I just remember being upset by the whole. I mean, I wasn't upset. I just didn't like the movie.
It's just such a contrast between the super squeaky clean earlier stuff to your enemies and death, and there's like, if you think about a movie like Babe, which has a similar scene where Babe sees the the slaughterhouse and everything like that and is freaking out, I feel like they do a much better job in something like Babe of balancing tone. You have Unlikely Friendship, you have a lot of different things going on in Babe, which I think is a brilliant movie. I absolutely love it. And they just do a better job of mixing these various tones together in a movie like that, so it all feels like, okay, this is part of the story and we're more invested. Maybe it helps that it's something like Babe that we just have one character that we're focusing on, so we're not trying to you do have multiple characters, but there's one character who's the character that we're rooting for. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but it's a very weird scene, I feel like.
It's a weird scene. And again, I think in a way it's a pivotal scene in that, Big Mom is trying to help Todd understand his role in society, basically, in their animal society, and also what Copper's role is, and again, just kind of putting the hammer down with a smile that you really can't be friends, and it's so in a way I think it's interesting because that it really starts to. Again, I didn't think about this as a child, but I think about it more as an adult, where it really introduces the theme of prejudice, and that to me seems like almost one of the more interesting parts of the film, if there is one.
Yeah, and you're sort of taught that it's an interesting thing because you're taught that you're enemies, and that's certainly a good lesson for kids to kind of think about, that that people that we're taught with these prejudices, like you say. But it's a little bit different with animals, because animals are just, they're not like humans in the same
Yeah.
way. And I guess these are
Right.
anthropomorphic, but
Right.
it gets kind of muddled because
It does. It
Todd,
gets really muddled.
because are we supposed to judge Copper as a horrible person, a horrible dog?
Right. Because he's following is what his master is teaching him, as well as his natural instincts.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It gets kind of muddled, but there's a core there that like you could definitely watch this with kids and be like, okay, what can we learn from this? And you can have a
you can
good
talk about it.
discussion with your. I maintain that any Disney movie, you can watch it, even the bad ones. You can watch it and you can have a discussion, and it can be like with proactive parenting, because you hear these things, oh, they're teaching, like recently you heard this about Snow White, people saying, oh, it's not right that the prince kisses her without her permission or whatever, which is insane in my opinion, but anyway, like I think those kind of things, you're just assuming that kids just like are a vacuum and they just take whatever. No, you have to use these things as tools to then have conversations with your kids and make sure they get the right message out of whatever it is anything that you're viewing. But that's my personal little TED talk on Disney movies, because I think
it's a good one. I agree with you. Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, there's this. So they finally get back after he's gone for the whole winter.
And so they've grown up, both of them.
Yes, they both grown up. And Copper's an experienced hunting dog. He's almost eclipsed Chief in Slade's reliance on him. And so Todd sneaks over there to visit him, and Copper tells him that he still likes him as a friend, but he's a hunting dog now, and they can never really speak. They can never. But the problem is that it awakes Chief, and they end up chasing.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so
Chief wakes up, and then so does Slade, right, with his shotgun.
Yes. And so Copper finds Todd where he's hiding, and he lets him go. And it's kind of it diverts Chief and Slade, but Todd says, it diverts Chief and Slade for a time, but Todd ends up escaping the hiding place, ends up on the railroad track, and Chief ends up there, and Chief gets knocked down and by the train, and he ends up breaking his leg. And this makes Copper and Slade very angry at Todd. Do you think they have a right to be angry at Todd?
Well, this is where, can you imagine the kind of arguments they were having in the studio?
Yes.
Because this is the scene, that Rachel mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, where there was a big division at the studio where some of the animators wanted, and I guess what happens in the book is that Chief dies. This Chief dies from the fall. And then that's what really fuels Copper's anger and hatred towards Todd. But in the film, they ended up Chief lives. So he just breaks his leg.
Yeah.
And they almost use it as a humor device.
Yeah, because Chief is all of a sudden a diva.
Yeah.
And getting cared for.
Yeah, cared for, gets to sleep inside and gets all this extra, TLC or whatever. But because there's a bit of that competition that they play between Chief and Copper. But
yeah,
I honestly think it would have been better had Chief died.
Yeah, I agree. There's no doubt about it. You need those stakes in order to, because Slade is always a crazy person in this movie. He's driving down the road, shooting people, right? That's great.
He's a horrible shot too, by the way. How many shots is he firing at little Copper? And he can't. I know that that's not the easiest thing to shoot a fox, probably, but still,
yes,
stormtroopers.
Yeah, and so the fact that I guess I can believe that Slade would vow vengeance because he's a crazy person, but it does make it a little bit hard to believe that Copper would be so mad
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah,
because I don't feel like him and Chief were even that close.
Yeah.
Or good friends.
Yeah. But if Chief had died, then you could have really seen that could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, maybe it would have made it a little more, dark, but it was already there. It was already there.
And so then Amos goes over to the Widow Tweed and he says, that fox of yours almost killed Chief and I'm going to get him. And so she decides that she needs to say goodbye to Todd.
Oh my gosh, Rachel. I can't tell you how much I hate this scene.
Yeah. It starts with her in her cabin, whatever, her house, and then her driving, and there is this poem. And I'm going to read it. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm sitting down.
All right. We met, it seems, such a short time ago. You looked at me, needing me so. Yet from your sadness, our happiness grew. And I found out I needed you too. I remember how we used to play. I recall those rainy days, the fire's glow that kept us warm. And now I find we're both alone. Goodbye may seem forever. Farewell is like the end. But in my heart's a memory, and there you'll always be. Seem forever. Farewell is like the end. But in my heart's a memory, and there you'll always be. So are we just cold and dead to the world that we don't like this poem?
I mean, I felt like, again, I was just being like, it's like, this harmless person was like, I hate this scene so much. And I mean, it's sad. I mean, it is sad. It didn't make me cry. But it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, she's going to go dump it. She's going to go take him into the woods. And I know she's doing it to save him. But
yes.
But still, I mean, the poor thing has, she just takes his collar off and then he's no longer domesticated. And I was like, good luck. She doesn't like even leave him any food or anything. She's just like,
that's true. She doesn't leave him
fly be free, You're just like,
I mean, I guess at least she takes him to a reserve where he's supposed to be protected.
Well, until Amos shows up with all his traps and all.
The same person. In my review on my blog, that our friend Mark, he said, you're probably the only woman I know who disliked the poem that every other woman says it's a speed or something like that.
It's a horrible poem.
Evidently, I am not a cold woman. Valentine's is coming up. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
No, but it's really a horrible scene, I guess. And again, I don't know. Maybe
it's just with the music and it's just so sappy and over the top. And again, it's so sad, but it's just not. It doesn't feel like it's done authentically. A really good example of a very similar kind of scene is in Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
When she does that whole the times I forget what the name of that song is, but she goes through the seasons and it's a very sappy song, but in a sappy moment, but it's just done so much better.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And I don't know, maybe it's the difference between it being a song,
right,
versus being a poem. Mother Earth and Father Time, that's the name of the song.
Oh, that's right. What is hard too, and again, not familiar with the source material, and don't want to second guess the creative team, but these scenes are so hard when the mom knows what's going to happen. It's almost like taking your pet to the slaughter or whatever, because the pet's all happy. He's like, oh, we're in the car, Todd's loving it. He's like, oh, this is so much fun. We're going for a drive. And then he figures out, oh, wait a minute.
It does feel like a very 1970s, even this was 1981. It feels like a very 1970s moment to me. If you look at something like the songs in The Rescuers are pretty sappy as well. Not as much as this, but they're pretty sappy. And then like I said, Charlotte's Web, just like sort of like the Carpenters, that kind of era of like that kind of sort of your Captain and Tennille and your what's his name? I can't think of the name of the other. There's a bunch of really kind of corny singers. They're right around
type of thing, yeah.
So I mean, the Osmonds, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I don't know what necessarily would have made this scene better. And I'm trying to think of other scenes in films where this where this sort of thing happens.
Extended poem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But this
aren't in like Imbic Pentameter. There's not many. Obviously there's poems in Shakespeare, but those are.
This thing is just, it's painful. It's just pain.
I agree. It's not my favorite part. I don't like it. Give me way more of the boomer and over this horrible poem.
Well, and again, but then too, it just leads to my whole thing that there's just nothing happy in this movie. And again, not that I don't want anything hard or sad to be in, because I mean there has to be, right? Because there's no plot, but it's just like it's like one more horrible thing that happens.
I tell you what I hate a lot more than the poem though is I really dislike Vixie.
Dixie is not a great. She is not a good character.
I hate this trope in Disney movies. They haven't done it as much for a while, but there used to be this thing that a male character would see a female character and their eyes would get kind of hypnotized.
Yeah.
And bug-eyed, and
instantly
they would lose all sense of who they are, what was going on. And this movie just dwells in that. Oh, like I don't like it in Bambi. I don't like it in Jungle Book. I don't and I really hate it here because Vixie starts out literally the first time you see her, she has light on her and it's pretty close. Might as well have a halo over her head.
Yeah.
And it's just like, ugh. And you get Todd being a jerk and, calling her a silly, empty-headed female. And then it really irritates me when Big Mama sings the Natural Attraction song and all of a sudden everything is great and everything's better. And like, no, I don't like that. I don't like the way that Vixie's just like, you were acting like an idiot, but we're I guess she just sung a song.
Yeah.
And you like me, so there we go.
Yeah, I don't like Vixie as a character either. She's voiced by Sandy Duncan, who's kind of seem to do a lot of stuff in that era. I know she did a lot of work with Disney and other folks too. But I'm with you. It doesn't work. The only thing that I like about Vixie is that I was glad that they brought another fox into the story that could help him survive. That's what he needed.
But very soon, she kind of has to get dumbed down to his level.
Yeah, I don't like how they handle it. No, I don't like how they handle it at all.
I said in my review, Vixie is the cooing, fawning, giggling, idiot female character I hate in Disney. I said, why couldn't it have been like in The Lion King, where they meet in some way as little foxes and then meet up later, or anything? But the instant love, Twitter-pated scene from Bambi all over again. I said she reminds me of an idiotic Michael Bay woman in fox form. There you go. That's my thoughts about Vixie.
Go Rachel.
So there you go. I'll put a link down if you want to read my review.
Yeah.
But really, wouldn't that made it so much better if there had been one scene at the very beginning with them meeting as puppies, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call little foxes,
Yeah.
but you know, and then when
Meeting up again, and there could have
like,
been some kind of a connection.
yeah, like, oh, you're back. I remember you, or whatever. That would have been way better.
Yeah, than what happened. And
Yeah.
again, Big Mama's there to like facilitate it all. And
Yeah.
thank goodness.
Yeah. And
but,
I say, what makes it worse is that Todd behaves like a pompous moron when they meet.
Yeah.
But one song from Big Mama and she's back on board. Oh, well, he's so. But one song from Big Mama and she's back on board he's pretty train. At least in this movie, we have Big Mama and the Widow. But seriously, why does every other Disney woman have to be a complete twit? Thank you, Renaissance, for changing that at least a little. So, and that's the danger of reviewing the movies chronologically. That's why I didn't want to do it this time, because you get in this period and you can tell I'm like a little bit bitter and a little bit like, why did I do this? So,
well, and again, too, their relationship is really uninteresting.
Yeah, it's just really lame.
Yeah, it's almost like they took a very formulaic, easy way with it, and it could have been a lot more interesting. And I'm almost thinking, I mean, you look back, it almost would have been more interesting if Todd hadn't met a fox. He was some other like Timon and Pumba. You know,
right?
Help him live.
Yeah, but everybody's like so mean to him in the forest. You know, the badger. And
there was only that nice little porcupine or whatever who let him, have shelter for the night. He was all like sad when he just left, because he just like rudely left.
I mean, it's lucky Big Mama got all the way out there to the reserve. I don't even know where it is, but she was able to go. But yeah, and I guess she doesn't fly south. Do owls fly south? I don't even know.
I don't know, but Boomer and Dinky did. They left.
Right.
They migrated, and the caterpillar was able to find its way inside to one of the house plants. At Widow Tweed's place.
And did you know that there was a long tradition of almost every single Disney movie for years of having an owl in?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point.
Ever since Hercules, I don't think we've had an owl, but for a long time, I did a whole article on rotoscopers that some of them are very, like the one in Beauty and the Beast is really hard to find, and there's not one in Lion King. I mean, there's not every movie, but a lot of movies there would be a Disney owl.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. Cool.
Obviously, Winnie the Pooh is the most iconic one, but anyway, it's kind of interesting. And then Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, and Ichabod Crane. There's a famous owl, so it's interesting. So Big Mama is up there in the owls, and so Amos decides to set traps for both Todd and Vixie, and he goes into the reserve despite it being not allowed. And I think you could get in big trouble. Can you be arrested if you're hunting in the reserve?
And again, just crazy man.
He's a crazy man.
Gone crazy on the reserve.
And so he sets all these traps. And I think this is from here, you've got pretty good animation throughout this whole kind of scene.
And a pretty well-paced action scene, even though it's completely out of place, as we discussed.
Yeah.
As you mentioned.
And Amos gets his foot stuck in the trap at one point.
And
gets injured.
And his gun is away from him.
Right.
And then this giant bear shows up who's, of course, wanting to kill them all.
It is a very well animated scene. It's just pretty scary, especially with how syrupy it has been up until then to all of a sudden. It just feels like it's in a different movie. It doesn't feel like it belongs in this movie.
Yeah.
To me. And I feel like I don't know, you need something, just something that's a little bit sillier as a villain kind of bear, that's not, this is very scary.
Well, and also the bear is quite realistic in its character design.
Whereas the rest really isn't.
The rest of the animals all are pretty, anthropomorphic, as you mentioned, or really cartoony.
Right. I agree.
And yeah, this bear shows up, and holy smokes, it's a really jarring,
yes,
moment, and pretty tense, yeah, because the hunters, or Amos is trapped, and they can't get to the gun, and then Todd comes to try to. I think the only thing that worked for me is that Todd. So both the bear is pretty much knocked out Copper and Amos, and he's going to kill him. And so then it's Todd who comes back and
to Copper's defense.
Tries to take down the bear.
Yeah.
To save them both. And I wonder if maybe that's again out. It probably could have been something not so jarring, but clearly something story-wise needed to happen for Copper to kind of wake up a little bit and say,
right. So Todd goes to Copper's defense, which then when Amos is going to shoot Todd, Copper comes to Todd's defense. And so they kind of realize that they really are true friends at heart, and that they will always remember their friendship, even if they won't really see each other anymore. And and then you get the sort of voiceover at the end with, you hear them saying, "Todd, you're my best friend," and over from when they were little. And then you also see the widow bandaging Amos's wounds.
Yeah, and they're still kind of fighting, but it's almost like their feud
is over
got healed too. And then Todd and Vixie are looking down at it from afar.
Yeah. I just said the leads to a chase with a climactic bear scene. It's an amazingly animated scene, but for a movie that has been kindergarten aged friendly, the bear's too scary. My nieces all bolted at the bear in Brave, and I know they would be terrified of the bear here as well. Yeah. And I think that's true. So
one thing that that when in that near final scene, when finally Copper stands in front of Todd, so the owner would have to kill Copper in order to kill Todd. I was calling it the Pocahontas moment, even though it's not.
Pocahontas that's a good comparison.
Comes way after, but it's the Pocahontas moment in The Fox and the Hound.
Yeah,
and I have to tell you, Rachel, I think it's the only moment that I really liked in the movie.
Yeah,
and I was reminded, because I think it's beautifully composed. And I think it's the only thing that they finally where they got the tone right.
The tone right. Yeah.
And they got the animation right too, because both Todd and Copper, they weren't being goofy. I mean, not Goofy the character, but they weren't. The look that they animated on both of their faces, because I think Todd was very scared and just like, I'm going to die. And I thought the way they were able to animate Copper being defiant almost, and just saying, don't, because there was no words that he's not barking or any area too. I don't know. I thought that was the only scene that moved me.
Yeah.
In this, and particularly in this rewatch.
Yeah, I said in my review, another mixed bag for me, and I think recommending the picture entirely depends on the type of moviegoer you are. If you don't mind ooey gooey messages laid on very thick, then you'll eat this up. I went with it for most of the way. It eventually wore me down a little bit, but I hated Vixie just as much as about any character in Disney ever. So there you go. Mixed bag for me. It's, I don't know, it's just a very uneven film. But we, so I don't know, I ended up, I think I was probably a little too generous in my ranking, because I think I had it at 39, which is probably too high. for this movie, but whatever. And I have some thoughts from my Twitter followers. So I have, let's see. Kyle Vox says Heart's in the Right Place has some impressive sequences and some weight. The movie was a fight between the young story people, animators, and the management that usurped the mantle after Walt's passing, and it shows. So yeah, he's exactly right. Our friend Mark, that we talked about animation commendation, he says decent and probably as good as people say it is. Not underrated, not overrated. It's just right. Lawn Gnome says, very important film for the world we live in today. There's a message about the younger generations trying to let the older generations understand that things can change. Screen Talk says, I adore this film. Both of them are adorable. The message is sophisticated and the feels are real, which very much surprised me because I was the last person I would ever expect to like a real sappy movie like this is my friend Larry at LC Screen Talk. But there you go. AJ Howell says, I think it's underrated. I like how Disney made some bold, interesting story choices, even if they did tone down elements like Chief's accident. I also think some of the backgrounds have a nice painterly look, and the ending makes me cry every single time. Alex Klepp says, I put it under the category of underrated. It certainly isn't perfect, but it has some really strong moments, particularly the ending. It's really bittersweet. Then Katie Drosting says, I grew up on this movie as it was one of the only Disney movies I had. I loved the two comedic birds scenes, and the bears scenes are some of my favorite scenes still. I'm biased from nostalgia, but I think it's a pretty good movie. So there you go. Some different thoughts.
Yeah, I got the feedback. Can I mention one other thing, Rachel? Yes. At the very end, when this is, I think, as we were saying, the Widow Tweed kind of trying to bandage up Amos Slade, and it's all slapstick, and they're kind of throwing barbs back at each other, whatever. But you can tell that their feud is kind of over.
Right.
Then still, the woodpecker and the finch are trying to get little Squeaks the caterpillar, and he's in the tree, and then all of a sudden, all this rainbow dust flies out of the hole, and Squeaks is transformed into a butterfly.
Butterfly, yes.
And so no longer something desirable for them to eat, and they see this transformation. I don't know if it's symbolic or not. If it's kind of like a circle of life thing, or if it's showing that something has changed and things are better, or if it's just how they just decided to wrap up that storyline.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I thought they were kind of a fun diversion anyway, so that was kind of a fun way to end off that story. I didn't mind the humor like you did. I thought they were cute enough, so that was kind of funny. It kind of reminds me of Heimlich in Bug's Life.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe John Lasseter got inspiration.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Look, I have wings. I'm flying.
Beautiful butterfly.
I love that so much. So yeah, mixed bag. I don't know. Like I'd probably, if I was doing like 1 to 10, I'd probably give it I gave it a C+ in my original review, which is probably, maybe I'd be more like a C now. I don't think it's awful. I don't want to die, but yeah, it's definitely one of the weaker ones for sure.
It's, for me, it's in my low tier. It's not one that as I said, I've ever enjoyed.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, that sounds pretty good. Well, let's figure out what we're gonna talk about next month.
All right, exciting.
Pull up
the magic number generator. Magic number generator.
All right, 16. Have we done what's 16? Sleeping Beauty.
Oh. Outstanding.
Yes, that one's gonna be really fun.
Sleeping Beauty just turned 60.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I put a little post about that on my blog last week, and that's exciting.
Yeah, because we've done Lady and the Tramp. That's one I was thinking, because that's 15.
Yeah.
So perfect. All right. Sleeping Beauty next month. That'll be really fun. I'm excited to talk about that.
Me too.
Yeah. About Fox and the Hound. Let us know if you're listening what you think of this movie. Where would you rank it? Were we too hard on it? Let us know in the comment section. Let us know on Twitter.
Am I just completely heartless?
You tear up in the poem, let me know, because evidently I'm the only woman who doesn't. That'd be great. And so, Stanford, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Stanford Clark, and I also have a movie blog and podcast, which you can find at moviespastandpresent.com.
Great. Yes, check that out for sure. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews all over social media and on iTunes and YouTube. So make sure to check that out. And we'd love your thoughts. And we will be also reviewing for Obscure Animation this month, reviewing the Hayao Miyazaki film, The Wind Rises. So that's going to be really fun to talk about. So we'll look forward to Sleeping Beauty next month. And again, let us know your thoughts, and we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.